Hello students. In this audio presentation I will continue from where I left in my previous audio presentation, and there only I told you that the author had already started the journey, and along with two able friends, one is Shitan and one is Daniel, and they were moving in a car. And as Shitan suggested to the author that if they move by the southwest direction, then obviously it is the shortest route to reach Mount Kailash. And the experience of watching gazelles and kuang or the wild donkeys were also being discussed in the previous paragraphs. Now let me continue. As hill started to push up once more from the rocky wilderness, it is related with rugged terrain or rugged landscape, totally barren. It's not something related with arid pasture, it is totally barren. So I continue. As hill started to push up once more from the rocky wilderness, we passed solitary drogbas, and by this time you all are well acquainted with this Tibetan term drogbas. Actually, they are the Tibetan shepherds. This is a Tibetan name, drogbas. Solitary means these shepherds are alone. After a certain time, after a certain distance, another shepherd is there. That means they are not in a group. They are solitary. They are alone in a place. After they travel a certain distance, then again they get to see another solitary drogba. Tending their flocks. I already told you the main occupation of these shepherds, Tibetan drogbas, were tending and caring the flock of sheep. Sometimes men, hardly sometimes. Sometimes men, sometimes women. These well-wrapped figures would pause. Pause means obviously to stop and stare at our car, because it is not a regular thing that they see car every day, every now and then. So whenever they see a car, they stop and they stare. And the same thing happened here also. Men and women, sometimes hardly they are seen, and when they are seen, it seems that they stop their work for a time being, and as the car passes by, they stare at the car. It happened in the case of the narrator also, as the narrator was moving in a car. Well wrapped figures means, it seems I already told you, that was the reason Hamo presented the author with the sheepskin coat, because the more higher you travel in the higher altitude, you need some woolen garments, right? You need some clothes, warmer clothes. So these people, they are the local people. They are quite habituated with this place. Still, they have covered their body. Well-wrapped figures would pause and stare at our car, occasionally waving as we passed. They were moving, occasionally moving, but they were looking at the car. When the track took us close to their animals, the sheep would take evasive action, veering away from the speeding vehicle. Now, they were tending their flock of sheep. Now, it seems that while the car was moving on, and the car was about to cross their flock of sheep, the sheep started drifting or moving from one place to that other direction. So I repeat this line once again. When the track took us close to their animals, obviously their animals is flock of sheep, because they are shepherds by profession and by nature. The sheep would take evasive action, veering away. Veering means moving. Veer means to steer. Actually, veer is a verb. V-E-R. Veer means to steer away, to drift away, to move away. Veering away from the speeding vehicle, and here the speeding vehicle is referred to the car. Veering away from the speeding vehicle. Now I am moving on to the next paragraph. We passed nomads. Actually, nomads means we can say vagabonds. We can also use the term refugee also. As we passed nomads' tents, pitched in splendid isolation. These tents were in a very lonely place. The place is totally isolated, and it seems that they are not in a cluster. These tents were not in a cluster or neither in a group. These tents were separated from one to other. So, as we passed the nomads' dark tents, pitched in splendid isolation, usually with a huge black dog. Now, this black dog is can be referred as the bodyguard. So, huge black dog is there tied up near the tents of the nomads. So, I repeat this line. We passed nomads' dark tents, pitched in splendid isolation, and I told you all that it is they are not in a group, that you might see a cluster of tents or many tents. No, not like that. A single tent in a single isolated place, and near the tent there is a huge black Tibetan Mastiff. Mastiff is a breed of a dog. Mastiff, standing guard. These beasts would cock their great big heads, would actually lift. Cock their great big heads means they actually would lift their big heads when they became aware of our approach, when they are totally aware that we are moving, or when they heard something, obviously the sound of the engine of the car, they would lift their great big heads when they found that we were approaching towards the tents in our car. They would explode into action, and what they would do and what actually they did, they went on chasing the car of the narrator. So here it is written, as we continue to draw closer, they would explode into action, speeding directly towards us like a bullet from a gun and nearly as fast. So they went on chasing our car, and the speed at which they were pursuing our car was compared with a bullet fired from a gun. That means the speed at which they were chasing our car, that is compared with a firing bullet that has already been fired from a gun. Now look at the comparison being made here, and it seems that they went on chasing the narrator's car. They went on chasing the narrator's car till they were within that restricted domain or that area. As they passed by that area, then obviously they stopped chasing. But as they were in that particular area of that nomad's tent, as they were actually moving by that area, the dogs went on chasing them. So let me continue. As we continue to draw closer, they would explode into action, speeding directly towards us like a bullet from a gun and nearly as fast. And they were hotly pursuing us or chasing us. And it seems that the speed at which they were running around was compared with the speed of a bullet fired from a gun. Now I am moving on to another paragraph. These shaggy monsters, actually those dogs were referred as shaggy monsters, blacker than the darkest night. They are huge and they are black in color. Blacker than the darkest night. Look at the comparison. The first one been made, the comparison when they were chasing the narrator's car. It seems that they were hotly pursuing or chasing the car that was compared with a firing bullet from a gun. Now it seems that the color and the shape is huge, and obviously when it comes to the color, it seems that they are blacker than the darkest night, usually wore bright red collars and barked furiously with massive jaws. They were been given a red collar. It's like some uniform because it's their pet dog of the Tibetans, and the way they used to bark, it's furious, and their jaws are quite huge or massive jaws. They were completely fearless of our vehicle. They are actually fearless. They are super courageous, you can say. That is the reason they are the bodyguards, and they were kept near the tents of the by the nomads. They, or rather to say, they were stationed near the tents of the nomads. They are completely fearless of our vehicle, shooting straight into our path, causing Shaitan to break and swerve. Now, as they were pursuing us at a greater speed, Shaitan, who was actually driving the car, he had to swerve the direction so that we stay unharmed. The dog would make chase for 100 meters or so before easing off. So they would chase us till we crossed their area. So as we were stationed in their area, as we were proceeding by the area of the nomad's tent, they were very active. But as we move out from their domain or from their specified local place or area, they stopped chasing us. The indication is in this line. So before easing off, having seen us of the property, I was talking about the specified area. As we had crossed that area, they stopped chasing us. As we were still within that area, they were madly pursuing us or chasing us. But as we move off the property, they stopped chasing us. It wasn't difficult to understand why Tibetan Mastiffs became popular in China's imperial courts as hunting dogs, brought along the Silk Road in ancient times as tribute from Tibet. And the Tibetans, in order to please the Chinese rulers, to exempt them from the taxes, because they had to pay taxes to the Chinese emperors or the rulers. So as a token of trust and love, they used to gift the Chinese emperor these huge mastiff dogs. So, and they were brought along the Silk Road. So Silk Road, from times immemorial, this particular route or way was being used for business purpose, or rather to say in other words, for business transactions. So that is the reason why the references to these big huge mastiff dogs can be found in Chinese history, because they used to abound, or rather to say, they used to be along with the Chinese emperor. And it seems that in the Chinese imperial courts, these dogs were kept as the hunting dogs. It was as a token of trust and tribute from Tibet to the Chinese emperors. Why? Because the Tibetans, they used to give those dogs as a token of love, so that, and trust, so that there should be an exemption of taxes on the part of the Chinese emperors. So I repeat this line before I close up with this particular paragraph. Tibetan Mastiffs became popular in China's imperial courts as hunting dogs, brought along the Silk Road in ancient times as tribute from Tibet. So in order to exempt the Tibetans from taxes, the Tibetans used to give these dogs to the Chinese emperors or rulers as a token of love and trust. And if you closely read Chinese history, you will find the mention of these big, huge, mastiff dogs who acted as bodyguards in the Chinese imperial royal courts. These dogs used to act as bodyguards in the Chinese imperial royal courts. So I stop this audio presentation right here. Dear students, listen to this audio, and if there is any doubt, kindly ask me, and we will continue with the next paragraph in my next audio. Thank you, students. Thank you all.